All right. Q, we live on YouTube yet? You know?
Yep, we live. Yep.
All right. Let's go. Let's get it going. Islam, Islam, Islam. Rising to our highest height. Allah, Father of the universe, the Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation by night and by day through his holy prophet, Drew Ali. Amen. Rising to our highest height again, giving perfect praise to Allah, extending honors to all the true and divine prophets, namely Jesus, Muhammad, Confucius, and to the last prophet in new days and times, the honorable prophet, Moorish American. We want to extend honors to the forerunner of the prophet Noble Ali, the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who did indeed warn and stir up the nations. We want to extend further honors to the Moorish flag. That's the red flag with the five-pointed green star in the center. Those five points represent the five highest principles known to man in love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Want to extend honors to all the ancestors known and unknown, to the Moorish Divine and National Movement, to the Moorish Holy Temple of Science of the World, Free and Sundry Moorish Science Temple of America, to our National Grand Sheikh, Jelani Bey, Grand Sheikh Hakeem, Islam, Islam, Islam. Divine warning by the Prophet, Noble Drew Ali. Prophet warns all Muslims, governors ordered to read proclamation at each meeting. I hereby inform all members that they must end all radical, agitating speeches uh, while at work or at their homes or in the streets. We offer peace and not destruction. Stop flashing your cards at Europeans. It causes confusion. Remember, your card is for your salvation, and failure to obey these orders will be of severe consequence. We offer love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. And when these principles are violated, justice must then take its course. Any member or group of members who hold malicious feelings towards the temple or the prophet or violate the divine covenant of the Moorish movement will receive their reward from Allah for their unjust deeds. All true Moors will and must obey the laws laid down to them by their prophet. If they lose confidence in their prophet, they should turn in their card and button, cease wearing their turban and fez, and return to the state where the prophet found you. This is a holy and divine movement founded by the prophet Noble Drew Ali, and if the prophet is not right, the temple is not right. Therefore, the prophet is sending out a divine plea to all Moorish Americans that they do their part in protecting their prophet in the temple. This is an everlasting movement founded by the prophet through the will of Allah to redeem his people from their sinful ways. Prophet Noble Drew Ali. Um, so as we know, it's November in the United States. They typically celebrate Thanksgiving during this time. But for us as Moorish Americans, we have a different connection to the holiday, the so-called holiday known as Thanksgiving, as given to us by our prophet Noble Drew Ali, right? Our prophet was sent here to redeem us, the fallen sons and daughters of North America, from our sinful ways, right? And the things that we practice in name and principle, right, for our salvation, right? Part of that was returning to the state of mind of our foremothers and forefathers' divine and national principles, returning the church and Christianity back to the Europeans, right? You know, he also teaches us that we are Hebrew Muslims, right? Um, we are connected to the genealogy and the line in genealogy through which Jesus came, right? Through our foremother, the great Moabitess Ruth, right? So even in the Bible, it talks about not going the way of the heathens, right? Um, just like the Bible describes not to celebrate uh like Christmas, what we now know today as Christmas, right? This is Jeremiah 10 verse 5. I think it's Jeremiah 10 verses 1 through 5, where it talks about the hands of the workmen of the axe cutting down a tree and putting the tree and decorating it with gold and silver, right? And fastening it down so that it don't move. There are these principles that we learn as Moorish Americans that bring us back to the customary traditions of our ancient foremothers and forefathers, right? Bring us back to the customs of of our ancient foremothers and forefathers, right? We didn't celebrate these things, right? We knew that these were things that the other nations celebrated, typically or predominantly the European nations, right? Most of these festivals that we know come from they're ancient festivals, right? Because most of them are Norse, what they call Norsemen or Vikings, right, and or Romans, the Greeks, of antiquity. Um, Maybe not the ancient Europeans, because the term European, it really comes from the Phoenician were Europa, who was a Phoenician princess according to mythology. So Europe was actually named after a Phoenician prince, mythological Phoenician princess, just like Atlas is the mythological forebear of Morocco, right? The Maghreb, right? When you study who Atlas was, um, you find these kind of things. So more Europeans of antiquity are more so the ones that celebrated these festivals that now in modern times we find over here in the United States, just like in Europe, in the European countries, that we celebrate these same traditions, all kind of disguised under, you know, um, various religious holidays and such like that. So, like I said, when it comes to our Prophet Noble Drew Ali, there is particular there's a particular reading that he put out or he published, and it's called Thanksgiving for Whom, right? This is from, actually, Prophet didn't put this out. This was, this was drafted by someone in the Moorish Divine National Movement, right? But it's very insightful, right? When we look at it. And it goes like this, right? It says, and Thanksgiving for whom? And what is this day that you call Thanksgiving? What is the history of it if you know? You know that upon the day that you call Thanksgiving, that you celebrate the death and the surrender of your own so-called Black forefathers, right? On November 25th, 1491, after a long bloody fight against the Moors, Asiatic Muslims, who occupied Spain for over 700 years, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain fell upon their knees and gave thanks to Santiago for their victory over the Moors. Now, I'll stop right here and just let me see if I could pull up who Santiago is. Let me see, Catholic. Uh, um, I think this might have been like a Saint James. I should have had this already, but hold on. Saint Santiago, James the Apostle. Great. So James the Great, he actually was considered, I guess, the apostle of Spain. Right. So again, right here it says Saint James is the patron saint of Spain, and according to tradition, what are believed to be his remains are held in Santiago de Compostela in Galicia. Right. Um, that's in northwestern Spain. Right. So he's saying that they fell on their knees and gave thanks to Santiago. Right. What's up with my screen? Okay. Right. It says, for their victory over the Moors. On this same day, the Pope of Rome proclaimed that day to forever be a day of thanksgiving for all European Christians. Why? because the so-called blacks of Granada, called Moors, who were originally from Africa, Spain, and Arabia, surrendered the city of Granada, right? Now, see how he mentions that they was from Africa, Spain, and Arabia? That's because um, the Europeans during that time considered the descendants of Africa, or the fact is that during that time, the descendants of Africa, those that was living in North Africa, called the Berbers, were the original group that migrated out of Arabia and into North Africa. Right. They were the people that Joshua, son of Nun, chased out of the land of Canaan. These are the Jebusites, the Girgashites, right? These are the people that we learn about travel, um, to Egypt and settled in that portion of Egypt during that time, right? These are the same people. Um, and then the second wave of Arabians came after that around the time.
Okay, could we like maybe switch up the sound effect, please? I'm losing it.
The second set of them came after the time of Muhammad, Arabians, right? So, and then of course Spain, because you had these Africans and Arab, and some were African and Arab mixed peoples. And then when I say Arabs, I'm not talking about modern day Arabs that we see in Arabia and that we see in like the Middle East and North Africa now. These Arabs that were around during the time of Muhammad, they looked like brothers. They was dark skinned brothers. They, when you look at an original Arabian, the word Arab really means, some people say nomad, but it really was a term for like blacks as well, dark skinned people, right? The Hebrew or Yiddish term Arab with a P instead of a B means black or dark skin, right? But it says they surrendered the city of Granada, the last stronghold of the Moors in Spain, and the walls of the Moorish Empire came tumbling down. He says, these Sadian Moors, Sada black, were driven into Morocco and further down into West Africa, and were later betrayed, captured, and sold into America as slaves. So these Moors that were chased out of Spain during that time, they went back into Morocco, and then they went down into the Senegal, the Ivory Coast, like around that, where they say that the African slave trade, the so-called transatlantic slave trade, took place, right? And it says, hunting down the stern, deep olive Khajarite Moor from Baghdad, Turkey, and slaying or enslaving him was an act highly regarded by the Christian European forces who despised these Moors. Because you got to understand, the Europeans that instituted slavery against so-called black people for 700 years were fighting the Moors. Imagine warfare with a group of people that takes you 700 years to reclaim. You're gonna have a very deep, intense disdain for these specific people, right? So when we talk about the slave trade and who started it and who was targeted, it it it, it only makes sense that those people that were enslaved, that were dark-skinned people, were Moors, because those people that were doing the enslaving were enemies of specifically the Moors for 700 years. You understand what I'm saying? Like these people, these Europeans, they were, again, like it says, um it was regarded, uh what he said was an act, it was an act that was highly regarded by the Christian European forces. So to catch you a Moor was like, ooh, they didn't want any regular, just like African or somebody that was just Negro. You really had to be a dark, if you was dark skinned and you spoke Arabic, you had an Arabic name, Muslim name, because most other Africans that they try to say that we come from, or they say so-called black people were enslaved descendants from, were what they call animists. Like they practice like voodoo, and they didn't really practice like Islam or Judaism, or they weren't Christian. So the Muslims, the Christians, and the Jews of any complexion would the kind of look at these people like they was kind of like backwards or savages, like the lower, of a lower class. So if these Europeans was running into anybody, they wasn't necessarily worried about somebody that wasn't Muslim. They all they knew was Muslims. Like the only type of dark person that they knew to look for and capture was one that spoke Arabic, had a Islamic name, and was Muslim. If you was dark skinned and you didn't do any of those things, they wasn't like they knew like it's not you. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we not really after you. You know what I'm saying? And we gotta understand the history that we're taught is not the accurate history of what really happened during this time period, right? After 1492, when the fall of Granada and the Moorish Empire, the Moors and the Europeans was at war. Like, this is why the Europeans had to do so many treaties with the Barbary states, because it was so much warfare and so much, like, going on between those two peoples during that time, that it was just crazy. You know what I mean? So we have to take that into consideration when we think about the true history. It only makes sense that we, as a people that was enslaved, were the Moors, because this was who the Europeans, regarded highly as their enemy for so long. You know what I mean? So, continuing, right? It says, despise these Moors, mockingly called turkeys. And the European looked upon these Turkish Moors as being wild and heathen peoples and regarded them as their natural enemies. So you got to be careful with the term Turk, because the term Turk is really designated to like Western Asian people that migrated from like the Central Asian, Western Asian kind of landmass and went into what we now know as the Middle East. And for a time, they ruled, as the Ottoman Turks. The Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire is really the Turkish Empire, and these people are a lot more like lightly complected now, right? The original inhabitants of Anatolia, which is modern day Turkey, were the Hittites. Right, Hittite people are very dark skinned. Like, the Prophet talks about the Amorites, the Hittites, the Moabites in chapter 47. So these people were pushed down further into Arabia and North Africa, and Palestine and stuff like that after these Turks kind of took over these Western Asian people. But the European used the term Turk to really refer to anybody that was kind of Muslim during the time. Eventually, it ended up getting applied to Europeans that converted to Islam to escape slavery, because when we enslaved the Europeans, we would always offer them the option to convert in order to not be enslaved. A lot of them went with that. Some of them decided to become eunuchs and watch the harems. Others were beheaded and killed. But a lot of Europeans converted to Islam during this time. So this is why you see a lot of paintings with a lot of fair complected Muslims that are older paintings, and they, people try to associate them as Moors, but those, they're not Moors, they're just converts, right? They're European converts. So it says what you actually celebrate on your so-called Thanksgiving is the proclamation of the Pope of Rome, who later, in league with Queen Isabel, sent Cardinal Jimenez to Spain to murder any Moors that resisted the religion of Christianity. And when you look up Cardinal Jimenez, that's what he was known for. He was judge, jury, and executioner during those times, and he really enforced Catholic or canon law on anybody that was subject to the crown during that time. Right, that's what he was known for. It says this was a day of great sorrow for our people all over the world, but now you celebrate this fall of a Moorish power and government and the rise of the European power and government and call it Thanksgiving. Who is it that has taught you this, that November 25th is a day of Thanksgiving? And this Moorish power that fell, know you not that these are the forefathers of you who call yourselves Black Christians here in America? And now you eat the turkey and you kill the turkey for your Thanksgiving day, as the European powers destroyed the quote unquote Turkeys, who were the forefathers of your mothers and fathers from East Asia, right? And in this, you celebrate the loss of your own land, the rape of your own women, the murder of your own children, the humiliation of your own forefathers, the fall of the Moorish Empire, the enslavement of your own peoples. Yes, you celebrate this dark and shameful day in the history of your own people and call it Thanksgiving, right? So this is why, you know, we all come from, different backgrounds and stuff like that. We got family members that are still caught up in, this celebration. And but as Moors, we typically don't celebrate Thanksgiving or any of these so-called holidays. And for us as Moors, this is why, especially for this particular holiday. So, um, so what this article was talking about was what is known as the surrender of Granada, right? It mentioned that this time period was um, when Granada fell, right? So it says the Treaty of Granada, 1491, also known as the Surrender of Granada or the Capitulations. It was signed and ratified on November 25th, 1491. So, right, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, da 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 da. That happened a year after, not even a year, less than a year after Granada fell. So the European powers during that time, they were, they were, they didn't waste any time with, taking control of the trade routes that the Moors had. It's my opinion that the um, Columbus's journey to the Americas was, just another episode of the Europeans, you know, finding one of the Moorish trade routes and wanting to go take over it themselves, right? Um, because this land was already known to these West African Moors, right? We know about Mansa Musa and his brother Abu Bakr, who abdicated the throne to Musa and sailed west to the Americas in search of land and other things, right? This is Ibn Khaldun, goes into this kind of historical thing, right? So there's a reference for this, and plus the archaeological evidence, right? When you study certain um, um, archaeologists, I'm trying to think. I forget what his name is. His last name is like Werner or something like that. But there's a few of them that when you look at like things like the Olmec heads and other terracotta that they found in Mexico and the Yucatan Peninsula that were very African-esque, right? They had like a lot of African um, like undertones to them, even with the way that the Native Americans wore the wampum belt and they had seashells that they would use to trade, right? These shells, that idea originated in Africa, Western Africa, but they used shells that were imported from India as trade, as currency. So that's the only other place on the planet that what the Native Americans was doing with the wampum belt and the seashells, as far as trade, is where it was happening, and it originated in Africa. So it's like 1+1 is 2 with that. So it says between Boabdil, the Sultan of Granada, and Ferdinand and Isabel, the King and Queen of Castile, Leon, Aragon, and Sicily. It ended the Granada War, which had started in 1482 and culminated in the siege and Battle of Granada, which began in the spring of 1491. Right. It says the treaty provided a short truce, followed by the relinquishment in January of 1492 of the sovereignty of the Muslim Emirate of Granada, founded in the 13th century to Catholic Spain. The treaty guaranteed a set of rights to the Moors, right, Muslim inhabitants, including religious tolerance and fair treatment in return for their surrender and capitulation. The capitulation granted native Jews in the surrounded territories the choice of either converting to Christianity or migrating to North Africa within 3 years. That was subsequently superseded by the Alhambra Decree in 1492, which forced all Jews in Spain to choose conversion or expulsion. So they really just did the treaty to kind of solidify things, right? Put it in right and get it in stone. But then they eventually kind of, went back on that, shortly thereafter, right? Um, Again, there was a set of rights that was guaranteed to the Moors. Those rights began to get, trampled on. And again, this is the same. Those rights are kind of like what civil rights, like that situation, because the Moors had become subject now. So they were forced to sign an agreement that had stipulated certain rights, but didn't guarantee them, obviously. Right? It's like, the privileges that they give to so-called black people here in America is under civil rights, right? Like they have them, but they could take them away at any time, right? It's the same kind of system in place, right? So it goes into the capitulation of 1492 contains 67 articles, among them which were the following: that both great and small should be perfectly secure in their persons, families, and properties, that they should be allowed to continue in their dwellings and residences, whether in the city, suburbs, or any other part of the country, that no Christian should enter the house of a Muslim or insult him in any way. Um, no Christian or Jew holding public offices by the appointment of the late Sultan should be allowed to exercise his functions to rule over them. It's a bunch of them that's kind of listed here. But continuing with what it says, right? It says, initially, the Catholic conquerors implemented and reinforced the generous terms of the treaty, right? A joint municipal council was established in Granada, and the Muslims were allowed to elect their own representatives. Despite pressure from the Spanish clergy, Ferdinand chose a laissez-faire policy towards the Muslims, right? So, at that point in time, the Moors and the Europeans, they had a joint municipal council, right? So there was Europeans, and there were, Moors, or Christians and Muslims, governing the laws and policies over this particular city at that time, which was Granada, right? So for a time they were working kind of together, right? And really it was kind of like I said, a thing where the European was like, we won, we just gonna kind of go through the motions with them, act like we giving them something to do, some rights, so that they could kind of chill out, and it kind of rocked us asleep again after we lost, because it wasn't much we could really do. I guess the Moors looked at it like, hey, well, they giving us a token, right? Instead of just killing everybody and just telling everybody leave, they was allowed to stay, practice their religion, da 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 da. So it kind of was like, things are a little bit the same, but the only thing would be is that, I'm pretty sure it was, taxes and who you were paying now, because you got to understand, once you go from being governed or ruled over by one form of a system, and then another system comes into place, you're not gonna the benefits that you enjoyed are going to be different from the benefits that you will enjoy under this new occupation. So that's probably the only dynamic that really changed, right? Was like, because under the Moors, the Christians and the Jews, you could practice your own religion, you had a lot of freedoms and stuff. Only thing that mattered was if you paid the tax, which was called jizya. Right? If you paid the jizya, then you was good to go. You know what I mean? You can kind of administrate your own area on your own, right? It says, towards the Muslims, hoping interaction with Catholics would make them understand the error of their faith and abandon it. Uh, Hernando de Talavera, a friar of converso origins, known for his moderation and piety, was appointed as the Archbishop of Granada. He was known for his preference of preaching based on Catholic reasoning as opposed to punishments and lashes. It says, when Ferdinand and Isabella visited the city in the summer of 1499, they were greeted by an enthusiastic crowd, including Muslims. Um, At the same time, Cardinal Francisco Jimenez Cisneros, the Archbishop of Toledo, arrived in Granada and began working alongside Talavera. Cisneros, he disliked Talavera's approach and began sending uncooperative Muslims, especially the noblemen, to prison where they were treated harshly until they agreed to convert. Right, so he came in and um, and this is the same Cardinal Jimenez. It's spelled with an X in the bit that we were reading. Thanksgiving for whom? He's the one that he was talking about that came in, and Ferdinand and Isabella were thankful for. But what he did was he came in and he was just cleaning up house. Like, oh, if you're not gonna get down, you're gonna lay down. So if you don't want to cooperate, you going to jail. Like, we locking you up, we putting you under the worst conditions, and we gonna force you to convert, right? So we gonna compel you to convert. And if you read the Holy Quran of Muhammad or the Holy Quran of Mecca, it talks about how there is no compulsion in Islam. There is no compulsion in religion, and this is one of the reasons. This is one of the things that when the the Arabs took over during the time of Muhammad, when they conquered um, Spain in 711, and when they were conquering other areas and things of that nature, right? From the Persian Empire to the Roman Empire to North Africa and Spain, they didn't compel anybody to convert. North Africa really converted voluntarily just because they understood, like they say nowadays, they understood the assignment. It was the Christians remain Christian. A lot of Christians remain Christian in Europe, and a lot of the other people in other places like Iraq, they remain Zoroastrians. The Hindus remain Hindu. There was a large Buddhist population under the Arab Muslim Empire, Moorish Empire during that time. Because they didn't compel you to convert. Like, you could still practice your religion as long as you paid the jizya tax. Cardinal Jimenez wasn't going for none of that. The Europeans were a lot. They worked kind of opposite when it came to that type of thing. That's where they differentiated from the Moors during that time, in that they wasn't going for it. Like, it wasn't going to be no tolerance. There wasn't going to be no religious tolerance at this point in time. Like, you Muslim, you acting crazy, you gotta convert. But we just gonna start converting everybody. And if you don't want to convert, you gotta leave. I don't care where you go, you gotta go. Right. It says Cisneros intensified the efforts, and in December 1499, he told Pope Alexander VI that 3,000 Muslims converted in a single day. That's a lot. Imagine if we could get 3,000 Moors to convert right now. Imagine we could get 3,000 of our people to convert from Christianity to Muslims right now. This was in 1499 in Granada, in one city, right? Cisneros' own church council warned that these methods might breach the treaty. It's the 16th century described the approach of his method. Described the approach as methods that were not correct. I don't know what a hagiographer is, but whoever that is. It says in December 1499, amid the increasingly forced conversions and triggered by an incident involving an attempt by the authorities to reconvert a Muslim woman who had converted from Christianity, the population of Albazin, the Muslim quarter of Granada, began to open an armed revolt. So this led to so the Moors believed that the Europeans had breached the treaty, right? And this is why they, revolted. The Europeans said that the revolt threw the Treaty of Granada out of the water, and this is what led to this particular thing, right? This incident. It says Talavera and Captain General Tendia resolved the situation by negotiating with the Muslims. Meanwhile, Cisneros was summoned to the court of Seville to account for his actions. He convinced the Catholic monarchs to issue a collective pardon on the rebels on the condition that they convert to Christianity. Consequently, the whole city of Granada nominally became Christian, and the treaty began to unravel. So, Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand went with Cardinal Jimenez, Cisneros, and ended up converting the entire, Granada. And this is the background of what they call like the Reconquista. Like, so when you start delving into what the Reconquista is, um, this is what really started it, right? It was directed towards the Moors, right? To further, Christianity during that time. Um, he also in that reading, they also mentioned let's see, they also mentioned another group of Moors by the name of, I'm not sure if I'm spelling it right. So he mentioned the Sadian. He said, what did he say in there? He mentioned. He said at at the bottom of the first column, it says these Sadian Moors, Sada Black, were driven into Morocco and further down into West Africa. So when he mentions the Sadian Moors, he's talking about, or when it mentions the Sadian Moors, it's talking about the Saudi or the Saidi dynasty, sultanate or dynasty, right? This dynasty was the last, what they call Sharifan dynasty of Morocco. Now, the first Sharifan dynasty of Morocco was under Idris the First, who was a descendant of Muhammad. Right, he was one of the descendants of Muhammad's eldest sons. Right, grandsons, Hussein, and he and his family were pretty much like his descendants before him and the descendants that were after Muhammad. They were murdered in Arabia by the it was either the Umayyad dynasty or the Abbasid dynasty. Now, the Abbasids, these were the relatives of Muhammad on his uncle's side, right? The Umayyads were also relatives or part of the Banu Hashim clan of the Quraysh tribe, which was, Banu Hashim and, the Quraysh are, this is the tribe that Muhammad descends from Mecca, right? When Muhammad passed away, there was a split between who should succeed him. And the split was between his cousin and son-in-law, Ali, and between um, those that converted from Mecca, right? And you got to understand, those that converted to Islam from Mecca, they only did so once they lost to Muhammad in battle, because the Meccans kicked Muhammad out of Mecca. And this is why he went to Medina, right? He migrated to Medina, and it was the people from Medina that supported his movement during that time. They were the ones that converted to Islam first. Ali, his nephew, his cousin and son-in-law, who married his daughter, Muhammad's daughter, and those two had children. Um, Ali was the first person to convert to Islam with Muhammad. So he was the first convert to the Islamic faith under Muhammad. So when Muhammad died, there was the split, and there were those that wanted Ali to become the next caliph or leader of the Muslims under after Muhammad. Then there were others that wanted um, uh, a man by the name of Umar, right? Um, uh, matter of fact, let me see. Oh, excuse me, not Umar. It was Abu Bakr. He was a companion of Muhammad. Right? He wasn't related to him. He was a companion. And those from Medina who converted first, they wanted Ali. Those converts that was really from Mecca wanted Abu Bakr. So it became a political thing now. As long as Muhammad was alive, the people from Medina and the people of Mecca kind of got along. They just tolerated each other. But it came up that, hey, the prophet is getting older. He might at any point in time he could go. Who's gonna? And it was those from one side didn't want Ali, right, for political purposes and financial purposes, to be honest, because Muhammad, as much as people might not agree with this and say, no, 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 Muhammad was very wealthy when he died. He was the leader of this entire new group of people that was under him. He was the captain general, like, you know what I mean? He was the head of command. We call him prophet now, but during that time, he was a warrior. There were many battles that he led. You know what I mean? He might not have been in them directly during certain times, but he was orchestrating them. He was a masterful tactician when it came to warfare. So when he was conquering these other tribes in Arabia after he won Mecca, because again, they converted in Mecca after a battle, right? The first battle was called the Battle of um let me see real quick. Let me make sure. Let me see. Yeah, so the first battle was called the Battle of Badr, Badr, right? The Meccans um, were defeated during this battle. Wait, hold on. Yeah, so there was the Battle of Badr in 624 AD. I think Muhammad died in 633 or something like that, 630. In 625 was the Battle of Uhud, where the Meccans defeated the Muslims, or those from Medina, right? It says the Meccans, the leader Abu Sufyan, who eventually converted to Islam and became a general under Muhammad after those from Medina beat them in battle. He said they say he led 3,000 soldiers to attack Medina after the Muslims were expelled from Mecca. The Muslims gained the initiative early, but the Meccans cavalry general Khalid ibn al-Walid launched a surprise attack that encircled the Muslims, and the Muslims withdrew, and the Meccans returned to Mecca. So Abu Sufyan, Khalid ibn Walid, they were not they didn't come, they fought against Muhammad. And if you know anything about, I did a whole series on Khalid ibn Walid, right? Khalid ibn Walid was one of the greatest generals of all time. He never lost a battle. No battle that he was in that he was in command of did he lose. He was part of the army of the Meccans against Muhammad, and they had lost to them, but he wasn't in charge. right? He wasn't the leader, right? He was like he was like it's like they said the cavalry general. Like so he at that point in time he was controlling the men on horseback, but he ended up becoming converting to Islam under Muhammad and joined Muhammad's forces and fought against the Meccans again. And then after that they conquered Mecca. He was the one that was kind of leading the battles up until the Muslims took Jerusalem. Once the Muslims took Jerusalem, he was demoted from leader of the army. For they say for political reasons. A lot of people because the uh, um, one of the caliphs after Abu Bakr, um, mm, who was it? Let me see. Um, so uh, after Muhammad died, Abu Bakr became caliph for 2 years. Then he died, and then a man by the name of Umar ibn Khattab, he became the caliph. Now Umar ibn Khattab and Khalid ibn Walid were cousins, first cousins. And when Khalid ibn when Umar ibn Khattab became caliph, he demoted Khalid immediately because they say that he felt that Khalid was going to become uh, the caliph at some point in time. He feared that, the Muslims really loved Khalid ibn Walid because he type of soldier he was. Right. That's all he did was just go to war and win battles. Like that's what he did. Like since he was young, he was trained. His father was very wealthy in Mecca. Matter of fact, his father is actually mentioned in the Quran in a Iraq. He's probably like one of the only uh, clansmen of Muhammad that was mentioned in the Quran, but he's mentioned in a way that's bad because he was the one in Mecca that was stirring up the most trouble behind Muhammad because he was so wealthy and so influential. He didn't you got to understand during that time what Muhammad brought to Mecca was what Jesus brought to Jerusalem. Right? It's like the Pharisees and the Sadducees looked at Jesus as a threat because he was going to stop their money. Who is this dude coming and saying that they don't have to make offerings and sacrifices no more? That's how we make our money. That's how we eat. So they they turned their back on Jesus. Just like in Mecca, the wealthy, merchants of Mecca, they looked at Muhammad as, he's trying to make everybody believe in one God. Everybody have their own thing that they doing. They come here, they spend money, they pray to their idols. He's gonna stop the money. He's gonna stop people coming to the Kaaba. And then when they realized that that wasn't necessarily what was gonna happen, they ended up converting, but they ended up taking over the movement through Abu Bakr, as opposed to Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law Ali. Right. But um I just missed hold on 1 second, y'all.
Islam. Islam Sheik.
Is Islam?
Yeah, I think you got muted.
Oh,
You had to take it back at least say about like 90 seconds for real.
okay. I was. All right. So, just going back to, who these Sadian Moors were. This dynasty again. Hold on, where we at? Uh, yeah, right here. All right. So, um, again, what it's saying is, that the Sadians, they ruled present day Morocco and parts of Northwest Africa in the 16th and 17th centuries. And it says that their rise to power started in 1510. So remember, it was 1491 when, shortly after that these, in this particular reading, it says these Sadian Moors were driven into Morocco and further down into West Africa, later betrayed, captured, and sold into America as slaves. So this is that time period that came after. Once they was chased down after 1491 into Morocco, they became a ruling dynasty in Morocco. So as it relates to the uh the consequent battles that happened after, because again, like once we got kicked out of Morocco, I mean Spain, we started capturing their ships, and they started capturing our ships, and started enslaving us. Like this is when the Barbary Wars started to really pop off and start going crazy. It was during this time. So when we look at the time frame, it matches, right? And so what it's saying here is that um right, the dynasty's rise to power started in 1510 when Muhammad al-Qaim was declared leader of the tribes of the Sus Valley in southern Morocco in their resistance against the Portuguese. So by this time, the Portuguese are now involved in attacking Morocco, right? And they actually occupied a place called Agadir and other coastal cities. So I'm not sure where Agadir is, but Portugal is along the kind of western coast of Spain. So they were coming down into Morocco, southern Morocco, a little bit further down here on the map, and they occupied these little coastal cities and stuff like that. So it says Al Qaim's son Ahmad al Araj. Now you see in the picture right here where he looked like. If you look in the picture, he got European features, but he looks dark. He painted dark. They like to iconoclast a lot of stuff. So he probably was a brother. You know what I mean? He looked a lot darker than what that picture is showing. And it says he secured control of Marrakesh by 1525. And after a period of rivalry, his brother, Muhammad al-Sheikh, captured Agadir from the Portuguese and had eventually captured Fez from the Wattasids. Now, um, they may get into who the Wattasids were in this reading, but they were the other group of Muslims in Morocco during that time that was vying for power over Morocco. They ended up siding with, I believe it was the Turks, the Ottoman Empire, in overthrowing this Sadian dynasty, right? And I believe they ruled afterwards too, but this didn't happen until later after what they talking about right now, right? So because again, the Wattasids controlled Fez, Morocco, right? So after the Sadians, they secured control over nearly all of Morocco. It says after Muhammad al-Sheikh's assassination by the Ottomans. So you see where now you see the Ottomans coming into play. And you got to remember the Moors during this time in Morocco. This blue, I think, yeah, according to this map, all of this blue represents the Ottomans. Now remember, I told you the Ottomans was the Turks, especially at this point in time, right? You know, anciently, kind of like I said, Anatolia, Turkey was occupied by dark-skinned people until the Western Asians moved into that area and kind of took over. They ended up taking over parts of Egypt. They ruled in Egypt as well. They ruled in, I think, Arabia too, under the Seljuk. They called them the Seljuk Empire. But these were people that, uh, after a while, they ended up becoming like slave soldiers for the different caliphs and, like, certain royal people at that time in Arabia, in North Africa and Egypt, right? And especially in Egypt, they had a whole army of converted Europeans that were Muslims, right? These Europeans were converted from Christianity, became Muslims, and they were part of the king's, like, royal army, or the vizier or the caliph's royal army. Because during that time, a lot of the Muslims, the caliphs, those that were in leadership positions, it was a lot of infighting. Like, you could get killed by your brother, by your uncle, because they wanted the power. You know what I'm saying? They wanted to be the ruler. Some of them thought, it kind of worked the same way as the medieval times in Europe. When you watch a lot of, like, um Game of Thrones, or certain stuff like that, when you see, like, somebody, he might have been the nephew of somebody and his uncle, you know, wanted to become the leader or something like that, right? Like, the king might have got killed and his son gets risen to be a king, but the king's younger brother feels like he's the rightful ruler, so he should rule because he would be next in line because his brother didn't he only had like one son or something like that. So the uncle tries to kill the son who's the king now, and then, so it was a lot of that going on during the time with the Muslims too. So what they did was they hired an army. They created an army that wasn't connected to them, whether like kinship wise or clan wise, because that's where a lot of it ended up like coming from. But eventually, these European converts that were soldiers, they got to the point where they were so big and they were like excellent warriors. They looked around and said, "Shit, hey, we the only people with the weapons, and we the only ones that could fight. Why are we slaves still?" And they took over, and they ruled Egypt. They ruled Turkey for a while, and those are the ones that kind of ruled the Ottoman Empire. So now, according to the map, you see the Ottoman Empire in blue here is pushing into North Africa, and it's reaching this green section is the Muslims, right? The Sadians. So you got to understand that the Moors during this time was getting attacked from the east, right? But the Ottomans was attacking them in the east, and then the Portuguese was attacking them in the west. And then inside Morocco, you have two groups, the Wattases and the Sadians, that are vying for power over Morocco. So you can only imagine how crazy things was getting, right? You had one group of people that said, you know what, we're gonna side with. So instead of them banding together like the Europeans did when the Moors was in Spain with so Ferdinand and Isabel, instead of fighting, they came together and kicked the Moors out. Now you got the Moors back in Morocco. It's two dynasties there. Instead of coming together to push the Europeans out from the east and the west, they started uh, um, partnering with the European powers to get the other one out, in hopes that the European power didn't betray them, but would just put them in place after everything was said and done. Because sometimes what would happen is, like, they would side with one group of Europeans to oust another group that they was vying for power with, and when they beat them or defeated them, the European would just take them out too. And this is how the Ottomans was able to push into North Africa like that. That's what they was doing. They was using one group against the other. When the other would defeat that group, they would kill the leader of that group and put their own person in and institute their own customary law. Right. So it says, after Muhammad al-Sheikh assassination by the Ottomans, his son Abdullah al-Ghalib enjoyed a relatively peaceful reign. His successors, however, fought with each other, culminating in the 1578 battle of what they call the Battle of the Three Kings, where the Portuguese military uh, int- where a Portuguese military intervention on behalf of Muhammad al-Mutawakkil was thoroughly defeated by Sadian forces. So Muhammad al-Mutawakkil was the Sultan of Morocco from 1574 to 1576. He was the oldest son of Abdullah al-Ghalib and became Sultan after his father's death. So, so again, the Portuguese intervened on behalf of him, and he was defeated by the Sadians. Wait, hold on. Wait, the Portuguese military on behalf of Muhammad al. So I'm trying to see who the Portuguese. So the Portuguese intervened on behalf of him. So that intervened on behalf of. Oh, they were defeated by the Sadians. Okay, okay. All right. So it says, in the wake of this victory, Ahmad al-Mansur became sultan and presided over the apogee of Sadian power. So the Sadian power was going down. So the Sadians, they was kind of, they was going down. It says in the later half of his reign, he launched a successful invasion of the Songhai Empire, resulting in the establishment of a pashalik centered on Timbuktu. So, so the Songhai Empire was defeated by Moorish Empire. Basically, what it's saying here. All right. It says after Al-Mansur's death in 1603, however, his sons fought a long conflict for succession, which divided the country and undermined the dynasty's power and prestige. So again, you notice how it is infighting, right? So he dies, and then his sons start fighting in between each other because they probably all own like a little piece of Morocco or something like that. That normally was how things went back then. Like your son would become the governor of this particular region, the other son would become the governor or the emir of this particular region, and so forth and so on. So after the father dies, it's like, all right, well, are we consolidating power? Who's going to consolidate power? And then it get ugly after that. But this was bringing down, the Moorish stronghold on Morocco during this time. So it says, while the Sadian realm was reunified at the end of the conflict in 1627, new factions in the region rose to challenge Sadian authority. The last Sadian Sultan, Ahmad al-Abbas, was assassinated in 1659, bringing the dynasty to an end. And it says Moulay al-Rashid later conquered Marrakesh in 1668 and led the Alauite dynasty to establish the new Sultanate of Morocco. So hold on. So Moulay al-Rashid, right? He was the son of the founder of the Alauite dynasty. Now, the Alauite dynasty is the dynasty that is currently in power in Morocco. So when you look at Morocco, when you look at the Sultan or the King of Morocco, he's an Alauite. They too say that they trace their lineage back to Muhammad, like the Sadians did, and the Idrisid dynasty did, right? He says he was the son and founder of the Alawite dynasty, Moulay Sharif. So they go that title again, Sharif, who took power in 1631. His half brother succeeded their still living father. Da 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 da. Right. Yeah, that's that. Right. Um. It says that the Sadians were an important chapter in the history of Morocco. They were the first Arab Sharifan dynasty to rule since the Idrisids. Remember, the Idrisid dynasty was the first Sharifan dynasty to rule in Morocco. Sharifan means that they trace their lineage from Muhammad, right? Through his cousin and son-in-law, Ali. Islam, Moj, y'all got any questions? I see we got like a new person on too. Billy Whitaker. Um, if y'all got any questions, just unmute your mic. Since the Idrisid dynasty, now, so Idris the first was the leader of this particular tribe back in those times that ruled in Morocco. Now, Um, his name was, or he was also known as Idris the Elder, and he was a Hassanid and the founder of the Idrisid dynasty. So I said that. So correction, in the beginning, I said that he was a descendant of Hussein, which was one of the other sons of Ali. Ali's other son was named Hassan. So he was a descendant from Hassan, right? So, and was the founder of the Idrisid dynasty in part of northern Morocco after fleeing the Hijaz. The Hijaz is, like it says right here, a region that includes the majority of the west coast of Saudi Arabia, covering the cities of Mecca, Medina, Jeddah, and the rest of those. So he was from the Hijaz. Now, if y'all also remember, I told y'all that the Hijaz is also called the Tihama, right? It's also called the Tihama. And the Tihama is it's the same Hebrew word as Tahom or Tihamat, which is where in the Bible it says that that's where Adam and Eve was created, or where the Garden of Eden is. And remember in our 101s, right? The prophet said, he said, "At what place on earth was the physical part of man formed?" It says, "In the Garden of Eden." He said, "Where's the Garden of Eden?" The answer, it says, "In the land of Canaan, in the city of Mecca." So the Garden of Eden, according to our doctrine, is located in the city of Mecca, or which is where the Hijaz is. The Hijaz, Mecca falls within the Hijaz, Mecca, Medina, Jeddah, and the other cities and stuff like that. But this is the Taham or Tahom, right? Um, where man was formed, where the Garden of Eden is. So, that's just another thing to kind of keep under your cap, right? And it says that he ruled from 788 to 791. So again, this is the Moors conquered Spain in 711. So 70 something years, almost 80 years after that, one of Muhammad's descendants is coming and relocating to Morocco, right? It says that he is credited with founding the dynasty that established Moroccan statehood and is regarded as the founding father of Morocco. Now, again, as Moors, we trace our lineage back to Morocco. Right? They tell us all the time that, y'all from Africa, y'all from West Africa, y'all from Africa. They don't say where in Africa we from. We just African Americans. We just from a whole continent. Like we just from everywhere in Africa. Because even Africans that come to America, they're not even African Americans. They come from somewhere: Mali, Senegal, Egypt, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Congo, Ghana, right? They come from somewhere. Sierra Leone. They're not African Americans, but they don't tell us where we come from. So again, this person is the founding, he's considered the founding father of where we from. And so, right. So just again, a little bit of history about how he got there is that it says he was the great grandchild of Hassan, who was the son of Fatima and Ali, and the grandson of the Islamic prophet Muhammad. So again, he's the great grandson of Muhammad, right? It said he was born and raised in Arabia. His paternal half brother, so his brothers on his father's side, Muhammad al-Nafs al-Zakiya and Ibrahim, had been killed by the Abbasids during a rebellion. Now remember, I told y'all the Abbasids, right, or Ibn Abbas, right? It says the Abbasid Caliphate was the third caliphate or rulership or dynasty to succeed the Islamic prophet Muhammad. So they came three, you could say, like, not generations, but they came three like leadership roles after Muhammad passed away. It says it was founded by a dynasty. It was founded by a dynasty descended from Muhammad's uncle Abbas ibn al-Muttalib. So just keep that in mind. That this same um, Abbasid peoples, right, killed Muhammad's great 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 grandsons, half brothers. So you got to understand the dynamic that's going on in Arabia at this time. It's Muhammad, part of Muhammad family fighting with another part of Muhammad family, and it's the older family again because the Abbasids they trace their lineage to Muhammad's uncle, right? It's he was older than Muhammad. It's the older family line that's fighting against and killing the younger family line of Muhammad. Why? Because there's tension there over leadership of Arabia. Because again, there was those that felt that the descendants of Muhammad should be the leaders of the Muslims, and you had another group in Arabia that felt that it shouldn't be that way. They wanted leadership over this dynasty. And notice what they did. They killed them. Right? It says his half-brother Yahya rose in revolt in Delaim, but was forced to surrender. He was persecuted by Caliph Harun al-Rashid thereafter and repeatedly imprisoned. So you got to understand, like, again, it's family against family. But what they was doing was they was imprisoning them. They was forcing them to surrender because they was fighting back, right? And eventually, like, a lot of them ended up dying that way. So they was either in prison, died in battle, or they were poisoned. Right? It says Idris himself participated along with Yahya in another uprising. It says in another Alid uprising. And so the Alids are those who claim descent from Ali ibn Abu Talib, the fourth caliph and the first imam in Shia Islam, because you got the Sunnis and you got the Shias. So the Sunnis follow pretty much the doctrine that came with Abu Bakr, right? This was the one that became caliph after Muhammad, after there was kind of like conflict between Abu Bakr and Ali. That the Shias wanted are the ones that they follow Ali's descendants as the leaders of the Muslim community, right? So again, it's this conflict between two sides, right? And it says after the revolt's defeat, he escaped and remained in hiding before moving to Egypt. So he went from Arabia to Egypt, just like we learn how the original Arabians, those Canaanites, because again, remember the prophet just said the Garden of Eden is in the land of Canaan in the holy city of Mecca. So Canaan is Mecca. But before there was, this migration from Arabia into Egypt, we learn in chapter 47 that the original Canaanites, Moabites, Hammatites, Hittites, they did the same thing, right? They went into Egypt and were granted that portion of Egypt that we know now as North Africa. So he went into Egypt, and then it says assisted uh, by the local head of the caliphal postal system, he managed to leave Egypt and reach the Maghreb, right? The Maghreb. He reached Western Africa or Morocco, right? And then it goes into a little bit more about his genealogy. But so again, right here, a little bit more about like that history with Idris. It said, fleeing the Abbasid Caliphate to the east in the aftermath of the Battle of Fa. I don't know how to pronounce that. It says he first established himself in 1788 in Volubilis in present-day Morocco with the help of local Berber allies. So when he got to Morocco, he allied himself with the local Berber people. Again, this is a brother coming from Arabia. He was attacked by his own family and stuff like that. He came to Morocco, and he was assisted by Berbers. You know what I'm saying? Now, you know anything about the term Berber, the term Berber just means it's another term for they say it's a term for barbarian, but that's where the word barbarian comes from. But the Berbers, when you look at who these people were, they were the original indigenous inhabitants of North Africa, part of the Berber people, there was a tribe called the Maori, Maure. This is where you get the term Moor from. So the Moors are really uh, a subgroup of the Berbers, like the entire Berber population of people, which again, the Berbers are descendants from the Canaanites. Like those are the Canaanites that settled in North Africa after fleeing Moses and Joshua, according to the Bible. Right. It says him and his son subsequently founded the city that became Fez. Fez became the capital of the Idrisis state, which ruled most of present-day Morocco and part of western Algeria. After Idris II's death, the realm was divided between his rival sons. Again, we read about that with the Sadians, how the sons started fighting each other in internecine, what they call civil war, right? Idris II, his sons ended up doing the same thing. It says, after a period of conflict, the dynasty's authority resumed and remained relatively stable between 836 and 863. In the late 9th century, however, they faced repeated challenges and local opposition. In the 10th century, the region came under the political domination of Zenata tribes, who fought proxy battles on behalf of the two rival powers in the region, the Fatimid Caliphate and the Umayyad Caliphate of Cordoba. The Idrisids were definitively expelled from Fez in 927, but held on to a reduced territory in the north of Morocco from their base at Hajar al-Nasir. They were finally defeated and removed from power in 974, and a brief attempt to regain power in 985 also failed. So again, just a little background. And they do mention in here like the Zenata tribes, right? The Zenatas were a group of Berbers, right? They were a Berber tribe. I don't know why it's not letting me. So the Zenata are a group of Berber tribes, historically one of the largest Berber confederations, along with the Sanhaja and the Masmuda. So you got the Zenata Berbers, you got the Sanhaja Berbers, you have the Masmuda Berbers, and then you also have right here, they call them the Al-Raba Berbers. They were a tribe in North Africa, which formed part of the Baranis Confederation. They played a role in the resistance to the Muslim conquest of the Maghreb and some other stuff as well. So yeah, so that's them. So did I go to this one? So it says so right here it talks about again. Is this the Sharifan dynasty? Yeah. So okay. So it's a lot of information as well about the Sadian dynasty. But again, the origins of the Sadian dynasty. Now, the reason why I mentioned, and I'm going through this, and some of you Moors already know this demonstration, is that as Moorish American Muslims, it's my belief that the Prophet took on the name Ali because we as Moors ourselves here in the Americas also trace our lineage to Ali and Muhammad, right? They say that the Prophet's name or his Muslim name is Sheikh Sharif Abdul Ali. You know, he got that name Sharif. Remember, the word Sharif is connected to those that are descended from Muhammad. And then the name Ali is directly connected to the cousin and son-in-law of Muhammad. You know, Ali ibn Abu Talib, who's mentioned right here. So that's the significance why I'm kind of going through who these people were, because again, they were mentioned in that reading that we just read. And it says that they were the ones that were betrayed, chased further south, and enslaved and put into slavery in the Americas. Who were the only people that was put into slavery in the Americas but so-called Black people? So if it was the Sadian Moors that were enslaved then who else we trace our lineage through? This why I give this demonstration, because that reference is very important and significant when trying to explain yourself as a Moorish American Muslim and an adherent of the laws of our Prophet Noble Drew Ali, because that's the connection, that's what gives us the. And if you notice too, where it says Sharifin, right? Um, so we'll go to this real quick. So again, it says the term. It says, in its broadest sense, it refers to any descendant of Muhammad's great grandfather Hashim and the Banu Hashim, right? The Hashemites, already in Muhammad's day, an established clan within the Meccan tribe of the Quraysh, including all descendants of Muhammad's paternal uncles, Abu Talib and Al Abbas. So this is, remember saying this is what it means in its broadest sense. So in its broadest sense, it kind of includes, all of Muhammad's family. It says more often it refers to a descendant of Ali, a son of Abu Talib and paternal cousin of Muhammad, especially but not exclusively through Ali's marriage to Muhammad's daughter Fatima. In the sense of descendants of Fatima and Ali, the most common one, the term effectively refers to all descendants of Muhammad. Right? So that's a little bit more of a smaller sense, but it says in the narrower sense, or the narrowest sense. So more directly, the term Sharifin, it refers only to someone who descends from Fatima and Ali's oldest son and Muhammad's grandson, Hassan, the Hassanids. Now remember, so it's talking about this in the narrowest sense. In the narrowest sense, it's saying that, the descendants of Hassan, who we just read, is Idris, right? Idris was a descendant of Hassan who fled to Morocco. Now you got another group called the Saadians who ruled Morocco a little bit later after this time. Because you got to remember, the Idrisid dynasty was in like the late 700s. The Saadian dynasty came in the 1500s. So there was a time span in between that there was no descendants of Muhammad ruling in Morocco. It may have been some Berbers or something like that. So another, Berber clan that didn't really have a connection to them until the Saadians came, right? So again, our prophet has this title in his name, Sharif, and then he has the name Ali, right? So the connection is there in that, those of us who fall within this, or like I said in the reading, those Sadians that was betrayed and put into slavery in the Americas, who was that? It was us. Right. So again, that's why I'm giving such a detailed, breakdown of this particular lineage. Right. Um, so, so I did read this. So I'm not gonna read the rest of this stuff though. Let's see if it got anything else worth kind of reading. Not really, but I mean it does, read it on your own time. Um, but I'm not gonna go through the whole thing right now. Um, but again, this is part of the reason why we as Moors, we don't do Thanksgiving. Because of this, like over here in the Americas, we're taught that Thanksgiving was this celebration between the colonialists and the Native Americans, because the colonists didn't know how to take care of themselves and they couldn't really fend for themselves. So the Native Americans helped them get settled in and all this different stuff. When the truth of the matter is, when it comes to that time period, the Europeans was at war with the Native Americans. Like there was, like, I know what we read in history, but or what we're taught in history in classes and stuff like that when we going through grade school. But the truth of the matter is that the Europeans over here were causing as much conflict between the natives here as they were in North Africa during their occupation. Because that's what these really did. The whole idea that these Europeans really came over here on, these boats and they just settled, and it was just peaceful, and we were just accepting of them and kind of help set them up and put them in position and stuff like that. To now you look and ain't no Native American tribes around no more because the Europeans killed them all. Like it's not no secret that millions of Native Americans was slaughtered, genocided behind Europeans settling here in the Americas. So like it's like it doesn't make sense that that's what this celebration is really about, like this peaceful coexistence between Europeans and Native Americans. So we give Thanksgiving, you know, again, November 25th, 1491. Again, this is what we kind of, this is what we reading about was the capitulation or the fall of Granada in Spain, right? With the Treaty of Granada, the surrender of Granada, November 25th, 1491, which led to, the Catholic European Church, really starting what it started. Because again, the next year after that, 1492, so-called Christopher Columbus gets permission from the same Ferdinand and Isabel of Spain to so-called to travel to the Americas to find the West Indies, as they say, historically speaking. So it was the year after the Moors lost Spain that this Italian, I don't even know what to call him, like, you know what I mean? And some people say he a fraud, but this Italian Christopher Columbus gets permission from the rulers of Spain to go to the Americas, or he just so happens to find America. So that
Hey, I think your Islam Sheik, your volume went down. I don't know if it's my phone.
I don't know. Y'all can hear me though. Y'all can hear me better now.
Oh, I can hear you now. Yeah, it's got louder. Yep.
Hold on, I'm about to put in my headphones so that might help. So yeah, so it was like, after that, this is when the fall happened. So, I kind of we got a couple more minutes left. I'll open it up if anybody wants to kind of add anything onto the demonstration. Anybody got any questions or anything like that? Any thoughts? Anything like, floor is open.
So, just to add to the demonstration as well, just off the aspect of the lineages and what took place. Like you mentioned, Isabella and Ferdinand. A lot of people don't know it was a 13-year war. I mean, there's been centuries of wars amongst the Europeans and Moors, for centuries. But the 13-year war prior to 1492, between Isabella Ferdinand and the Moors at that time, were crucial. And I mean, when you literally take the time and just kind of see like how you put everything in chronological order, in a sense where you're following a timeline, you can kind of see where all the way up to the expulsion, or even when you get to the mid, past the conquest of the Castilians, or the decree that was brought down later on in the mid 1500s by the Pope of Rome at that time, to have officially Moors become Spaniards and be reclassified as Spaniards under Catholicism. Like you mentioned earlier, all through history, wherever Mohammedan rule were, there was a special tolerance for other religions. Whenever you had Christian or Catholicism come into place in history where they're in rule, there's no tolerance for other religions to be successful. And that just lends to the government that we live in today. You know, there was a time where there was religious persecution. I don't think it's that way today. You know, that this being, you know, much more free country than what it was. I mean, even its founding principles was based off of, you know, freedom of religion in your First Amendment, Bill of Rights. So, you know, it again, you know, this timeline, you know, it's crucial to really pay attention and understand how that ties back into, you know, your language as a Moorish American, you know, and your understanding of the lineages and you know how that affects us, you know, here. Um, you know, so great demonstration sheet. Always love when, you know, we always visit, you know, Thanksgiving, and visit, you know, a lot of this symbolic reasons or symbolic, you know, history behind, you know, Turkey Day or whatever have you. Um, I yield on that point, sheet. Peace.
Yeah, Islam Sheik, you know, you hit on so many good points, man. Well, one of them, you know, don't forget about the Penzone brothers, Alphonse and Lorenz Penzone. They're the ones that led Cristobal Colon here. They were Moors. As a matter of fact, later on, they sued Christopher Columbus because he was calling it the Columbus expedition. They sued him and it became the Penzone expedition. So it was Moors that brought them here because they thought the world was flat. They were ignorant to actual navigation on the seas. And another point you brought up is the centuries of wars between Christians and Moors. And what we don't understand is in modern day, you know, when we declare ourselves as Moors, to the European people in general, that's a declaration of war. So a lot of times when we have litigations, it's very little to do with the complaint. It's more of your claim to being a Moor. That's the underlying problem. Because number one, per George Washington, you was never supposed to find out you was a Moor. And two, they as a people pledged a blood oath to never let the descendants of the Moors know who they are. So that's just like when we say, you know, Islamism is our religion. Or when we change our names and they say, well, what's your real name? In other words, I can't see you as free. I can't see you as a Moor. What is the slave name that my people gave you? That's the only thing I'm going to accept. This is why they try to bypass Moorish law, Moorish religion, and go back to the estate trust name and try to prosecute you under that, ignoring your change in status. So the wars that you were teaching about, dear brother, they have not stopped. The Christian Crusades have not ended and won't end it till somebody ain't breathing. Islam, I yield.
Islam Sheikh, thank you. Appreciate that, man. You know, both brothers, both of y'all are right. You know what I'm saying? The historical connection of what's really going on nowadays is like, it's hard to not see once you kind of start really digging into things. You know what I mean? Like National Grant said, you know, the Crusades haven't stopped. You know, they just took on a new form.
Mm-hmm.
When you know, when you study, you know, the history of the Crusades and what that meant to the Christians, and you'll understand why they go so hard now, the Europeans. There's a lot of the history that we just are not taught, you know, between, especially on the other side of the world in North Africa, because we, you know, to be honest, we was tearing them up for a point in time.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing, even since like the times of the Crusades, is that the Europeans have um I don't know, it's like they got a strong sense of like ideology behind, just coming together for a common cause. And that common cause be conquest.
Mhm.
Like our people, for some reason, like, when I study history, and I just kind of look at like how we ruled things, and we were tolerant. We didn't force conversion by the sword. We didn't compel people to become Muslims. We let them do it on their own volition or under the conditions of warfare. So, they would voluntarily do so. We weren't so keen on just like just taking places over and subjugating everybody. That was never like our thing. You know what I'm saying? Um, when you study history, though, that's their thing. That's what they do. Since the time of the Crusades, and even before that, um, when you look at the Roman Empire, you know, and how long they were able to, be an empire. They did the same thing, right? They took over places and they Hellenized, or the Greeks did that. They Hellenized it, or the Romans, they Romanized it. You know what I mean? There was no tolerance of your religion or, your culture, your customs, your traditions, and things of that nature. Like you had to give up everything, your name, your language, all of those things. So, that's why the prophet said, we returning the church and Christianity back to the Europeans, because
That's for their salvation. Yeah.
that's for their salvation. You know what I'm saying? Um,
And
mhm.
Islam, and that's why what kind of um, gets me about the conscious community. And religion divides people. Religion, we can't get nothing done because of religion. But no, it's not because of religion in general. It's because of Christianity. When they use that word religion, it's Christianity. Just the elephant in the room. Because there's no other religions, like you said, um, persecuting other people because they don't see, they don't see their ideology or their particular religion as the religion. You have some amongst Muslim factions that may do that, but they don't do that as forcefully as the Christian does. They demand that you do everything the way they do. You dress like they do. You speak like they do. Your customs are as their customs, and if you don't, then you are automatically identified as an open enemy. And it could just be as simple as, well, where do you go to church, young man? And you in Moorish garb. What church do you go to? They're asking you, what is your political affiliation? What is your law? And we say, well, I'm a Moorish American. I adhere to Islam. Oh, you're Muslim? Because that's their open enemy. See, now they want to identify which enemy are you? See, and we don't understand that. The Jews are on pins and needles because they know that their day is coming where we take our spot back. So we got to really wake up to look at all of the dynamics that's going on here. Religion is law, and even the Moriscos don't understand that they're involved in government while they're attending church. That the people in the church are government officials, not just officials, especially under 501c3. They're government agents. We just don't understand what the rock is cooking. We really don't.
Mhm.
Islam, I yield.
Mhm. Anybody got any questions? Like I said, I know there's somebody new on the call right now. I mean, brother, if you got any questions or anything you wanted to chime in about, now's the time. It don't even have to be on the specific topic or subject we was talking about. It could be really about anything because we're about to close shortly.
Come on, brother, don't be shy.
I mean, we ain't trying to force nobody to, put
No.
themselves out there or nothing like that. But we definitely appreciate, you jumping on the call. We definitely appreciate, if next time if you do decide to attend again, and keep coming back after that. That's what these calls are for. They're public. These are public calls. These are open to the public. And we don't have any problem or issues with answering any questions or concerns that you might have. That's what we're here for. So but yeah, I wanted to kind of touch on this topic before next Friday, because by that time, it'll be after Thanksgiving. And then for December, probably the Friday before Christmas, I want to do a demonstration on, the Christmas holiday and the celebration, the origins, et cetera, et cetera. Again, because, we got to know a lot of times, like we just, we come up and we grow up and we just do what, our parents did, our grandparents did. And we don't really understand the traditions that we following. You know what I mean? Same thing with like Easter. Like the whole concept or like the commercial concept behind Easter has nothing to do with the resurrection of Jesus. That's what it really is supposed to be about. But then when you start to dig a little deeper into it, Jesus didn't celebrate Christmas. If anything, he was opposed to celebrating Christmas because he was a Jew, he was a Hebrew, and part of his doctrine in the Old Testament law is that you don't do those things. You know what I'm saying? He wouldn't have done it. So like as a people, again, like we just really gotta understand, what it is that we be doing sometimes, and some of the things that we celebrate and their connection to a whole different group of people and just a whole different understanding of what that celebration is. You know what I'm saying? Um, so yeah, so I mean, if anybody got any other questions or any comments or concerns, we can go ahead and close for the night and end it early.
Great call, Sheik.
Islam, put your foot in it, Sheik.
Islam Moors, thank you. All right, so we can go ahead and close out for the night. Rising to our highest height, feet on a 45-degree angle, facing the east. Palms up on the perpendicular. 5 fingers on the left, 2 fingers on the right. Repeat after me. Allah,
Allah,
Father of the universe,
Father of the universe,
Father of love,
Father of
Father
love,
of love,
truth,
truth,
peace,
peace,
freedom,
freedom,
and justice.
and justice.
Allah is my protector,
Allah is my protector,
my guide,
my God,
my salvation,
my salvation,
by night and by day.
by night and by day.
Those holy prophet,
those
Whose holy prophet,
Raleigh,
Ali.
Islam.
Amen.
Islam.
All right, peace, Moors.
Peace.
Peace.